All right, everybody. Welcome back to another installment of Draco Dormians. And it took me this long to realize that I keep on forgetting to say the author's name. So I will say it now. By Cassandra Clare. I hope you guys are enjoying this story so far. A couple of trigger warnings for this particular chapter. We are going to get abuse again, a mention of past abuse, and also this is happening in the fifth year. And some of the men in this, particularly Lucius, is going to be very creepy. He is an older man, and Hermione is underage. There's going to be some very unsettling dialogue, so just be forewarned about that. I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. Anyway, and I think without much to do, let's us just get right into it. Chapter 6. The Boy Who Sulked. Hermione and Draco dived for the wardrobe and hurled themselves inside, slamming the door behind them. Harry pointed his wand feverishly at the window and whispered, "Reparo," and the smashed glass flew up and rearranged itself in the frame. Then he flung himself down on the bed and grabbed one of the bedposts, just as the bedroom door, finally strained to the breaking point, burst inward, and Lucius Malfoy hurtled into the room, looking livid with fury. "Boy!" he shouted at Harry. He looked like Draco when Draco got angry, very pale, with two burning red spots of color high on his cheekbones. Harry had the feeling that Lucius could have opened the door via sorcery, but had chosen to vent his ire on it instead. "Why didn't you open the door?" "I don't know," said Harry flatly. "Maybe because you tied me to the bed?" Lucius had the grace to look embarrassed. "I'd forgotten about that," he admitted, pointing his wand at Harry and snapped, "Finite incantatum." Harry let his hands drop into his lap. "Thanks," he said. "How is not my mother?" "She's fine," said Lucius curtly. "Can I see her?" "No," said Lucius shortly. "I need you to help me with something. I've got to go down into the dungeons, and I need you to come with me." Harry stared. This was just the invitation he had been hoping for, to be able to go and see where they were keeping Sirius. Only he wasn't wild about leaving Draco and Hermione shut up in the wardrobe. On the other hand, refusing Lucius Malfoy wasn't an option either. Lucius looked mad enough to spit nails already. "Okay," he said, got up, and followed Lucius out the door. It was pitch black in the wardrobe. One side of Hermione's face was squashed up against rough fabric. Her knee was jammed against Draco's, and her arm, which was pinned under Harry's bag, was going numb. She could hear Draco breathing softly next to her, and, faintly through the wardrobe door, she could hear Lucius and Harry talking. She heard Lucius tell Harry he was taking him to the dungeons, heard Harry agree, then she heard them leave the bedroom, the door closing behind them. Draco spoke first. Actually, he didn't really speak so much as began swearing, with great fluency and creativity, covering a wide range of topics. Both his vocabulary and his imagery impressed Hermione. It would never have occurred to her that you could do that with a broomstick. Right, she said finally. Sorry to interrupt. I was kind of enjoying all that. But I think we should get out of the wardrobe now. My arm is killing me. We can't get out of the wardrobe, said Draco flatly. It locks from the outside. Hermione gaped at him. What do you mean? Draco's voice was sharp. What part of it looks from the outside didn't you understand? Honestly, I thought you were meant to be clever. A simple opening charm. No, said Draco. This wardrobe's proof against that sort of thing. My father used to lock me in here when I misbehaved as a kid, so I should know. Your father sounds horrible. Leave my family out of this, Granger, said Draco shortly. Granger? Hermione made a noise of exasperation. First Harry, now you. Why are you both acting like you hate me all of a sudden? All I did to Harry was try to save his life, and as for you, I don't know what your grievance is, but you really don't know? Asked Draco, his voice cold and distant, now sounding like the voice Hermione remembered from innumerable unpleasant hallway encounters at Hogwarts. No, she said coldly. Lumos, said Draco. The light blossomed from the tip of his wand, illuminating the interior of the wardrobe. Hermione gave a start. Talking to Draco in the dark, she had been imagining his face as she remembered it from school. And now she was face to face with Harry again. The wand light made his green eyes glow like dark malachite, but he had Draco's angry smile. Potter, said Draco shortly, is being a git for 2 reasons. 1, he hates the idea of being rescued by me, which I completely understand. I would feel the same way in his position. And the second reason? Hermione said curiously. He's jealous, said Draco. Hermione felt as if her heart had dropped down into her stomach, then rocketed back up and lodged in her throat. Jealous? She said faintly. About what? Don't be dense, Hermione. Hermione reached out and caught Draco's hand, squeezing it tightly. What are you saying? Draco's hand just lay in hers, not moving. I know what you want to hear, he said, but is this how you want to hear it? Hermione paused. Was this how she wanted to hear that Harry maybe, possibly, had feelings for her, or even a feeling? Any feelings? From Draco's unwilling spying into the contents of Harry's head, it was a violation, even if an involuntary one. And then there was the possibility that Draco might be wrong. She shook her head and drew her hand out of his. No, she said. Just because I can feel what Harry feels, said Draco unexpectedly, doesn't mean I've stopped feeling what I feel. Hermione stared at him. What do you feel? She asked, and to her very great surprise, she was as interested in the answer to this question as she had been in the answer to her previous question. But Draco had lowered his head, and she couldn't see his eyes anymore, just the light reflecting off Harry's glasses. Right now I'm feeling hungry, he said. Very, very hungry. Haven't eaten since yesterday's lunch. Oh, said Hermione, obscurely disappointed. She dragged Harry's bag around to where she could get at the zipper. She was now sitting next to Draco. I brought a little food. I've got chocolate frogs, butterbeer, and pickles. Draco made a face. I said I was hungry, not pregnant. Hermione stifled a giggle. Well, it's all we've got. All right. Well, hand me a butterbeer. Maybe if I drink enough of them, I won't mind being shut up in this wardrobe so much. Harry followed Lucius Malfoy down the increasingly familiar twisted corridors of the manor until they reached the drawing room, where Lucius pulled the trapdoor open and gestured for Harry to come after him. Harry went, being careful not to touch anything. He didn't want his lack of Malfoy blood setting off any more alarms. The grey stone steps led down into a cold, damp darkness, illuminated only by the light from Lucius's wand. It was like a maze down here. Narrow passageways writhed in every direction like a bed of snakes. Harry tried to keep track of where they were going by muttering, "Left, right, sharp left," to himself as they turned, but he knew this was most likely futile. Lucius Malfoy spoke only once as they were passing from one narrow corridor into another, this one decorated with a mosaic of broken marble. "This will be good for your education, boy," he said. At last, they reached the entrance to a dungeon, a huge stone archway sealed off by a rusty iron gate, locked by an enormous lock in the shape of two twining serpents. Lucius Malfoy put his hand on it, and it popped open, allowing the gate to swing inward. Harry followed Lucius inside, and Lucius walked along the rows of barrel cells that lined the walls of the dungeon, stopped in front of one, and gazed inside. Harry stopped behind him, already knowing what he would see. The cell was a narrow room with drippy-looking stone walls and a straw-covered stone floor. On the far side of the cell was a low stone bench, on which a man was lying. It was Sirius. "Hello, Black," said Lucius, and Sirius sat up. Harry was relieved to see that they had taken the bodybind curse off him. "Comfortable?" Sirius growled, long and low, like a dog. "Right," said Lucius. "It's nice to see that you're proud of the fact you've been an animagus so long you can no longer speak like a human being." Sirius turned his head away. Lucius shook his head in disgust, glanced down, and pulled the left sleeve of his robe, baring his arm, on which the black skull and serpent design of the dark mark stood out as clearly as any tattoo. Then he raised it to his face and spoke into it, rather as if it had been a walkie-talkie. "McNair," he barked. "Peter, where are you?" The skull on Lucius's arm moved its jaws, and a tinny voice emerged.
"We cannot get into the dungeon without you,"
it said.
"We need someone to open the trapdoor."
"Damn," snapped Lucius. He glanced down at Harry. "Have you got your wand, boy?" "Yes," said Harry, taking it out and showing it to Lucius. "Very good, Draco," said Lucius, smiling and showing his pointed teeth. "I'd like you to watch Black until I return with Peter and McNair. If he moves, put the leg locker curse on him. You are old enough to take some responsibility now." He added, "It's time for us to see what you're made of." Harry suspected this had less to do with giving Draco an opportunity to show what he was made of than the fact that Lucius needed some help, and Narcissa was in no shape to pitch in. He was not about to complain, however. "Right, Father," he said. "I'll be here." Lucius left, leaving Harry standing there in the dark, twitching with impatience. As soon as he heard the gate shut behind Lucius in the distance, he darted up to the bars and called, "Sirius! Sirius! Don't be scared. It's me." Sirius raised his head. "Harry," he said, "what have you done to your hair? It looks awful." Harry choked in surprise. "You recognize me?" Sirius chuckled. I'm a dog, Harry, he said. I can recognize your scent faster than your appearance. I've known you were here since I got here. Harry rested his head against the bars of the cell. It was a relief to have someone recognize him, even if it was because of the way he smelled. Disguising yourself as Lucius Malfoy's son was awfully risky, though, said Sirius disapprovingly. What did you use? Polyjuice potion? Sort of, said Harry, and in a rush, he filled Sirius in as quickly as he possibly could on everything that had occurred in the past few days. Sirius listened in silence, occasionally nodding or making an exclamation of surprise, until Harry got to the part where Wormtail and McNair had brought Sirius into Draco's bedroom, and Narcissa had promptly fainted. Narcissa, said Sirius meditatively. Now there's a mystery. What? Narcissa Hardesty, said Sirius. Was the most beautiful girl in her year at Hogwarts. She was 2 years older than James and Lily and the rest of us. She was a very good student and was very popular. And then, in her last year, she got engaged to that slimy git, Lucius Malfoy. No one could understand it. It was the mystery of the year. She'd never been able to stand him before. Harry gave Sirius a hard look. It was difficult to tell under all the mud, blood, and grime, but he thought Sirius was looking a mite shifty. Did you fancy her, Sirius? He demanded. I might have, Sirius admitted. I knew her quite well, Harry. She was a good person. I would have bet anything on that. But then I would have said the same about Peter, and look what happened with him. So are you saying I should... Harry began, but Sirius interrupted him. Just keep an eye on her, Harry. That's all I'm saying. Forget her, Sirius, said Harry. The point is that we need to get you out of here. Sirius shook his head. Not now, he said. Malfoy will be back any second. I know that, said Harry. I was thinking of coming back down here later tonight. I'd leave Draco behind, he added darkly, but I need him to open the doors. They only open for Malfoys. Sirius raised his right hand to run it through his hair, and Harry saw that his left wrist was shackled to the bench on which he sat. Harry, he said, I know you don't like the Malfoy boy, but you do realize what will happen if the others catch him. They'll think he's you, and that'll be the end of him. Harry's throat went dry. They're planning on killing me, aren't they, Sirius? Worse, Sirius said grimly. I heard McNair and Wormtail talking about it on the way here. The plan was to use me to lure you to Malfoy Manor, and when they trapped you, to summon Voldemort. He wants to use the Lexertus curse on you. Sirius broke off. The unmistakable sound of the dungeon gate creaking open was plainly audible through the walls. Harry backed away from the bars and stood with his wand out as Lucius, McNair, and Wormtail came into the dungeon. They ignored Sirius. Lucius nodded once, curtly, at Harry. Stay here, boy, he said. I want you to watch this. Harry tightened his hands into fists. He knew they weren't going to hurt Sirius. A dead hostage was no hostage, but he didn't like the sound of this. Lucius had taken out his wand and was holding it in front of him. McNair took out his own wand and touched the tip to Lucius's. Then Wormtail raised his hand and put it on top of both wands. Dominus vocare, he said in his hissy, squeaking voice. A jet of green light flowed from the wand's tips and from Wormtail's hand. It coalesced into the shape of a head and a pair of shoulders. The face was blurred and indistinct, but Harry knew it at once. There was no other face like it, flat and evil, with slitted cat eyes. Voldemort. "Master," said Lucius in an ingratiating voice. "Why have you summoned me?" said the image of Voldemort in a harsh, smoky voice.
"We wish to show you that we have succeeded in capturing Sirius Black," said Wormtail, grinning all over his fat little face. "Do you see him there?" The image of Voldemort turned its head towards the cell that held Sirius. As it did so, its gaze swept over Harry, and he felt the familiar stabbing pain in his forehead. He took his nails into his palms, but didn't move. "I see him," said the Voldemort image. "And the boy, Harry Potter, has been notified." "I sent an owl to his school, Master," said McNair.
"Well, then," said Voldemort, "you have done good work. Shall be rewarded." And, as they all smiled, he added sharply, "When you have the boy in your custody, that is." Their smiles faded slightly. "That will be soon, Master," said Lucius. But Voldemort was looking at Harry again, and the pain in Harry's forehead was increasing. "Is that your son, Lucius?" "Yes, it is." Voldemort's gaze did not waver. "He has the look of you, Lucius," he said finally. "When he is old enough, you will bring him to me." "Of course, Master." At that, the image of Voldemort vanished. Apparently, he was not one for extended goodbyes, which was just as well in Harry's opinion. In another second, he was sure, the pain in his scar would have driven him to his knees. And yet, he was glad of the pain. At least it meant he was himself. Underneath the disguise, he was still Harry Potter. Lucius, however, seemed pleased, or as pleased as he ever seemed. He even put a hand on Harry's shoulder as they left the dungeon. Harry twisted around to try to get a glimpse of Sirius as they went through the gate, but Sirius had turned his face to the wall and didn't see him. Draco and Hermione had now drunk 4 butterbeers apiece, and a short and very giggly fight had broken out over who got to drink the last one. Draco had one, and as he cracked open the bottle, he looked at her thoughtfully. "What if your specky little boyfriend never comes back?" he said gloomily. "It'd be very embarrassing for me to die trapped in my own closet." "He's not my boyfriend," said Hermione automatically, "and he'll come back." Draco looked at her hard over his butterbeer. "Why?" he said. "Because Harry wouldn't leave us here to die," said Hermione, startled. "He might be annoyed at me, but he isn't homicidal." "No," said Draco. "I meant, why isn't he your boyfriend?" Hermione discovered she was having a bit of trouble focusing her eyes on Draco. Of course, it was about 4 a.m, and she hadn't slept in 20 hours. "Because," she said glumly, "he doesn't like me that way. He said so." "Stupid kid," said Draco matter-of-factly. "I don't think he knows what he wants." "You know what I'm really going to miss?" said Hermione suddenly, who was feeling an odd drifting sensation now, rather as if she were falling asleep without being tired. "Being surrounded by all this Armani?" suggested Draco. "No," said Hermione. "You, being like this. When we take the spell off you and Harry, you'll go right back to being nasty and horrible, won't you?" "On the plus side," said Draco, trying to sound light, "Harry will probably stop being such a weasel." Don't call him that, said Hermione, but her protest was more automatic than truly felt. You know what I'm going to miss? Said Draco, not looking at her, but staring fixedly at the spot above her head. What? Having you for a friend, he said very quickly. I mean, even back when you thought I was Harry, I was pretty good. I've got friends, you know, like Crabbe and Goyle, but I never get the feeling they die for me. Well, they might die of me. Like, if I told them to eat poison, they probably would. But that's more stupidity than loyalty, in my opinion. He sighed. But you'd die for Harry, wouldn't you? Yeah, said Hermione. Although I think I might die of him as well, she added, and Draco grinned crookedly. Hermione leaned sideways, so that she was now resting the back of her head on his shoulder. He was sitting very still. She could see the line of his profile, looking very serious and familiar in the light from the wand. I'll be sorry when you start shaving, she said dreamily. I love that translucent quality your skin has. I always have. And when you rip that first razor through your stubble, that'll be gone with it forever. She tilted her head up and kissed him on the cheek. He looked down at her. His eyes were inches from hers. Hermione, he said, who are you talking to? I don't know, she said, and this time she kissed him on the mouth. Whatever misgivings he might have had, they didn't show. He caught her by the shoulders and kissed her back, fiercely, and any half-thought she might have had that it was Harry she was kissing vanished. She had never kissed Harry, but she knew that if she did, it wouldn't be like this. This was kissing a stranger, or a near stranger. Every touch of his lips on hers sent bolts of fearful excitement zigzagging through her nerve endings. He didn't smell like Harry either. He smelled like Draco. Lime juice, pepper, cold night air. But when he said her name, it was in Harry's voice. She didn't care. They rolled over and over, kissing in the cramped confines of the wardrobe, banging off the sides, so preoccupied that neither of them noticed that someone was opening the wardrobe door and letting in the light from outside. So preoccupied, they didn't stop until a voice spoke and shattered their absorption with a sharp and furious finality. "What the hell is going on?" said Harry. Hermione was quite miserable. Harry wasn't speaking to her, and it looked like he might well have decided never to speak to her again. Oddly enough, he was still talking to Draco, although not with what could be termed great enthusiasm. Draco and Hermione had sprung apart violently the moment they had recognized Harry's presence, but it had been way too late. Hermione had stumbled out of the wardrobe, half hysterical and very sticky from butterbeer and kissing, and tried to take Harry's arm, but he had only looked down at her hand as if it was a blast-ended scroot that had landed on his sleeve and said, "Don't touch me," in a very flat, very cold, and very final voice. Then he said, "Come out of the closet, Malfoy. I need to talk to you." Draco had crawled out of the wardrobe looking apprehensive, apparently certain that Harry was going to throw a punch at him. But Harry didn't. Harry seemed convinced that the person who was at fault here was Hermione, who was now perched dejectedly on the end of Draco's bed, watching the two boys craft a plan to get Sirius out of the dungeons. "We'll both have to go," Harry was saying flatly. He had explained Sirius's situation, and Draco was quick to tell him that Hermione had thought to bring the invisibility cloak with them, just in case. At that, Harry had given him a long, icy stare, and Draco bent his head over the sketchy map Harry had drawn of the manor and its underground passages. "You have to let me in down there," Harry continued, as if Draco's last remark hadn't irked him. Because I need someone with Malfoy blood to open the doors. We could both fit under the invisibility cloak, but it's probably easier if you wear it. If you wear it and I go a little after you. If doors start popping open all over the place with no one operating them, questions might be asked. And stay under the cloak. You're public enemy number 1 around here, the way you look. Draco nodded. It's better if we go soon, he said. They'll be expecting Harry Potter to show up any minute now, and if you don't... Yeah, said Harry shortly. I was thinking we'd go right now. Good plan, said Draco. What about Hermione? Harry gave Hermione a long, cold, unfriendly look. Let's lock her in the wardrobe, he suggested. I'm not staying in the wardrobe, said Hermione flatly. I'm coming with you. No, you won't, said Harry, not looking at her. It's going to be risky, and I can't be constantly worried that you're going to do something stupid and jeopardize your safety. You know perfectly well that I don't do stupid things, said Hermione furiously. I think you've just proved that you do, said Harry, taking no trouble to conceal his contempt. Without pausing to consider what she was doing, Hermione took 5 quick steps towards Harry and hit him hard across the face. The map fell out of his hands, and he stared at her, looking as astonished as if his wand had jumped out of his pocket and started singing the national anthem. Draco was grinning. You might want to sit down, Harry, he said. The last time she did that to me, I saw stars for days. Harry and Hermione turned on Draco simultaneously. Shut up, Malfoy! Fine, then, said Draco. I'll just go sit over here. And he stalked off towards the far end of the room. He sounded resentful, but Hermione had a feeling he was eager to get away and let them go on with their argument in peace. I'm not going to apologize, she said to Harry in an icy tone. You deserved it. Yeah? Said Harry, still looking quite shocked, and decided to take Draco's advice and sat down on the edge of the bed. I guess it isn't any of my business. Harry, I know what you must be thinking. Oh, no you don't. I know you don't like Draco. Don't like him? Harry sounded as though she had just told him she was going out to dinner with Voldemort. This is Draco Malfoy, Hermione. You realize this is Draco Malfoy we're talking about here? The one who tried to get Hagrid sent to Azkaban about 1,000,000 times? The one who calls you a mudblood? The one whose father got Ron's dad fired from the Ministry of Magic? I didn't know about that, said Draco's voice from across the room. Shut up, said Harry, not taking his eyes off Hermione's face. The Draco Malfoy who said he wished you were dead. Do you remember that, Hermione? He's different now, she protested, knowing how stupid it sounded. He's changed. Changed? Repeated Harry, now sounding as if she had just told him she was going out to dinner with Voldemort and bringing a nice bottle of wine. What would Ron say if he knew you were making out in a closet with the guy whose father took his dad's job away and practically bankrupted his whole family? If it wasn't for Fred and George's joke shop, they'd be out on the street, and you know it. That's not fair, said Hermione, stung by this mention of Ron. That was Lucius, not Draco. I don't blame you for what the Dursleys do now, do I? Harry looked at her. God, you sound like Hagrid, adopting some horrible monster and insisting it's well-behaved. One of these days he'll bite your hand off, either when we take the spell off him or before. How do you know it's the spell, Harry? Said Hermione, casting an anxious glance across the room at Draco. Because, he said, paused and looked up at her. She could tell he was trying to decide whether or not to tell her something. Because I can feel the opposite happening to me, all right. You mean you can hear what he's thinking? He shook his head. No, something else. He took his wand out of his pocket and beckoned her to come closer to him. Watch this, Hermione, he said, and pointed the wand at a pair of spiders who were scuttling across a gap in the flagstones. Glorious, he hissed. A jet of black light shot out of his wand tip and hit one of the spiders. Instantly, it turned and savagely attacked its companion, biting off its head and proceeding to devour it. Harry watched the carnage with a grim look on his face. Hermione felt her eyes widen. Harry, she said, dismayed. That was dark magic, wasn't it? That wasn't even that nasty of a spell, said Harry woodenly, watching the remaining spider, which was now much fatter than it had been, scurry away across the floor. Most of them are loads nastier. But you've never done dark magic in your life, said Hermione, shocked. You would need lots of practice. I haven't, said Harry, but he has. He jerked his head towards Draco. Now do you see? Oh, Harry, she said, and sat down next to him on the bed. She could see how miserable he was, and she felt like her own heart was being shredded. She had promised herself that she wouldn't feel guilty about kissing Draco in the wardrobe, but now she did. It didn't make sense. She owed Harry nothing. He had said himself that he didn't like her that way, but there it was, and nothing to be done about it. Silently promising herself she would never kiss Draco again, she said fiercely, "We will get out of this, Harry. We will get Sirius out of the dungeon, and we'll get the spell off you, and everything will be back like it was before." "What good am I going to be to Sirius like this?" said Harry bleakly. "What if I suddenly go all mad and evil, and what if the spell won't ever come off?" "Then we can take it up with the Ministry when this is all over," said Draco, who had come back over to their side of the room and was gazing at Harry in irritation. "Would you stop with the self-pity, Potter? You're not going to go all mad and evil. This is me we're talking about, not Voldemort." "Same difference," said Harry, staring at the floor. "Right," said Draco. "Tell me, when did the boy who lived become the boy who sulked?" "Oh, very funny," said Harry. "Too bad none of the Slytherins are here to appreciate you, Malfoy." "I didn't choose to be the Tweedledee to your Tweedledum, Potter, but I'm not lying about whining on and on," said Draco shortly. "No," said Harry with heavy sarcasm. "Your method of solving the problem is by snogging Hermione every chance you get is working wonders. You deal with crisis in your way, Malfoy, and I'll deal with them in mine." "My way's more fun," Draco pointed out. "Your way," said Harry, "is going to get your head kicked in." "Now that's me talking, that is," said Draco, sounding pleased. I recognize the bad temper. Harry didn't look like he had even had the energy to tell Draco, who was smiling to himself, to shut up. He glared at him, stood up, grabbed the map, and said, "If we're going to go, we should go now." They went, Draco grabbing up the invisibility cloak, and Hermione took her wand, which had fallen inside the wardrobe during all the confusion. The first part of the plan went remarkably well. Draco, under the invisibility cloak, went into the drawing room, checked that no one was around, and opened up the trap door for Harry and Hermione. They scrambled down the stairs, and Draco followed after them. Using a combination of Draco's knowledge of the underground passages and Harry's incomplete map, they made their way slowly downward through the tunnels. Hermione was amazed at how huge they were. They passed underground rooms the size of tennis courts, some with sparkling jewelry like stalactites hanging down from the ceiling. "There are more rooms under your house than in your house, Draco," she said. "I know," said Draco's disembodied voice off to her left. "The manor is only about 600 years old, but these passages have been here for a millennia at least. My mother says she reckons it was once an underground city of some sort." "Do you know your mother went to school with my parents?" said Harry, who still wasn't looking very friendly, but seemed resigned to the situation. "I knew she went to Hogwarts, yeah. She used to be friends with Sirius," said Harry. "She's never mentioned him." Draco's voice was flat. He didn't sound like he wanted to talk about his mother. Hermione trailed along after them. She was brooding on what had transpired between her and Draco in the wardrobe, and wondered if Draco was thinking about it as well. It was a bit hard to tell, due to his current invisible state. It wasn't the first time she had ever kissed anyone. She had tried to kiss Ron a couple times during the summer at the Barrow in their 4th year, but nothing had ever come of it. Every time their lips had met, Ron had panicked and run away, then ignored her for several days thereafter. This had swiftly begun to grate on Hermione's nerves, and she had announced that they would just be friends from then on, which was a huge relief to both of them. Then there had been Victor. Hermione grinned to herself. Poor Victor. She had been thrilled by his initial attraction to her, and had allowed him to kiss her on several unmemorable occasions, although later she realized that she had mostly paid attention to him in hopes that it would make Harry jealous, which it hadn't. Harry, as usual, seemed to be able to see right through her, and could tell without trying that she wasn't really interested in Victor at all. She remembered how happy she had been right before the second task of the Triwizard Tournament, when they had told her she was going to be a hostage for one of the champions. The thing the champion would miss most. She assumed she would be Harry's hostage. The memory of how disappointed she'd been when it had turned out to be Victor wiped the grin off her face. "We're here," said Draco, somewhere off to her right. "Hold on." They were at the dungeon entrance, now tightly barred and locked with a snake-shaped lock. There was some rustling as Draco went up, and presumably did whatever it was he had to do to get the lock open. It fell to the side, and the gate squeaked open. Harry took her hand as they went through the gate, and she gripped it tightly. It was creepy down here, and the dungeon itself was very dark. Harry pulled her forward, and behind her, faintly, she could hear Draco following them. Harry dropped to his knees before a row of bars, and Hermione dropped down next to him. "Sirius," said Harry in a whisper. "Sirius, are you awake?" There was no answer. "Sirius," repeated Harry, a bit more urgently now. A tiny light blossomed like a firefly in the pitch darkness of the cell. As it bloomed outward, Hermione realized it was a light from a wand. It expanded to illuminate the cell, showing the bare, straw-covered floor, the dank walls, and Lucius Malfoy and Wormtail sitting together on the stone bench on which Sirius had been lying an hour before. "Draco," he said through his teeth, staring at Harry with an expression of dawning rage. "What are you doing here?" Behind her, Hermione heard the real Draco gasp in audible shock, but Harry was too stunned to speak. His eyes darted wildly from Lucius to the bare stone bench where he had last seen Sirius, and back again to Draco's father. Hermione realized that if anyone was going to do anything, it would have to be her. She stood up suddenly, letting go of Harry's hand as she did so. "Mr. Malfoy," she said, "this is all my fault." Lucius's gaze flicked to her, and she saw disbelief written on his face. "And who are you?" he said with some difficulty. I'm Draco's girlfriend, she said. I'm Mandy Brocklehurst. She bit her lip and sent out a silent apology to Mandy, whose name she had picked because the Brocklehursts were an old and well-respected wizarding family, a fact Lucius Malfoy would be sure to know. Harry, who was goggling at her in the manner of a stuffed frog, tried to grab her ankle warningly. She stomped on his hand. Draco and I were having an argument, she said plaintively. He said your family had the biggest dungeons in Britain, and I said that the Rookwoods did, and, well, she glanced down. I made him take me down here. It's all my fault. And she burst into tears, which was not hard to do since the situation was already so stressful. As she had expected, Lucius Malfoy, while perfectly at ease with all sorts of torture and nasty dark magic, was unprepared for the spectacle of a crying teenage girl. He looked deeply shaken. Stop that, he said to Hermione. How did you get here, anyway? Flu powder, said Hermione, and cried even harder than ever. I just missed Draco so much when he wasn't at school. I wanted to see Sirius Black because he's one of the most feared wizards in England. I just couldn't believe you had captured him, Mr. Malfoy. Oh, I never knew Draco's father was such a great wizard. This perked Lucius up. Well, he said, no harm done, I suppose, especially as Black is no longer even here. We have moved him to another cell. Hermione peeked at him through her fingers, hoping he might drop a bit more information, but he seemed declined to do so. I must say, Lucius added, looking at Harry now, I'm relieved to see you have a girlfriend, Draco. I was beginning to think you only fancied boys. There was a stifled sound from behind Hermione as the real Draco spluttered indignantly. Said Harry. Right. Well, I'm not. Though I can see why you thought so, he added, with those frilly clothes. He broke off as Draco stomped an invisible foot down on his ankle. She's quite pretty, too, said Lucius, who was now looking at Hermione again. It was not a look she liked. Why don't we go back upstairs and get a little better acquainted? He turned to Wormtail. Peter, you stay with the prisoner in the other room until he gets here. Wormtail nodded, but was looking at Hermione with a confused expression on his face. With a sick swoop in her stomach, Hermione realized that he was probably wondering where he had seen her before, because the truth was, he had seen her before, with Harry. Of course, she had been 13 then, she was 15 now, and her appearance had changed drastically. She was at least a foot taller, had managed to tame, if not straighten, her hair, and of course her teeth were different. And her figure? Yuck! She hoped Wormtail wasn't looking at her figure. In the meantime, said Lucius, Amanda and I will go upstairs and talk. Draco, get up off the floor. You may come with us if you wish. And he swept out of the cell, taking Hermione's arm as he did so, and propelling her forcefully up the stairs. And that is it for this chapter. Thank you guys so much for joining in and listening. A few outro notes. There's this really weird thing that used to happen in the fandom, and I don't know why it is, but butterbeer cannot get you drunk, guys. There is absolutely no alcoholic content in butterbeer. It is just a very sweet drink. But for some reason, the fandom decided that it had alcohol in it. I've always thought that that was really strange. The other thing is Narcissa's last name. This was before any of us actually knew that she was related to the Blacks. So there's that to consider. This was long before that. I just thought that I would make that note. And as always, if you are enjoying what you're hearing, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And be sure to check out my Patreon if you like art of the spicy variety. Anyway, that is all for this one, guys, and I will see you in the next one.